Well, one of the studies that I've recently published is a study where we looked at the reasons why many electronic cigarette users find these products so successful in helping them to quit smoking. We did focus group interviews with 11 different electronic cigarette users, and basically based on these focus groups, we were able to identify common themes that seem to be common among all of these users. And some of the things that we identified were quite interesting. So one of the things that we found was that the users uniformly viewed electronic cigarettes as being more effective than nicotine replacement therapy. Many of them had used NRT in the past unsuccessfully. And so what is it that's different about electronic cigarettes that made it more successful, more effective for these people? So one of the things was that the product simulates actual smoking. And many of the respondents told us that the physical sensations of holding the cigarette, putting it into their mouth, exhaling, that is all part of the smoking experience, of the smoking addiction to them. And that by simulating that, it was able to replace smoking in a way that NRT can't possibly do. Another theme was that there's an identity to being an electronic cigarette user. You're a vapor. It's an identity. The behavior you're engaging in is vaping. You know, there's a whole vocabulary that's built up around the vaping community. There are support groups, so there's a social aspect to it. There's a lot of social support. You don't see that with a nicotine patch. You know, there's no nicotine patch support group, or there's no nicotine patch users forum on the internet that I'm aware of. Whereas there is, you know, there's Vapors Forum and e-cigarette forum and lots of online, vibrant online communities which provide support. But they're really, when you're using an electronic cigarette, it's more than, it gives you an identity. It's not, you're not so much as just quitting smoking as you're developing a new identity as a vapor. The other thing that we found, which was fascinating to me, was that there are elements of kind of a hobby that are part of the experience. So choosing your electronic, the liquid that you're going to use, choosing the flavors, deciding on what type of system you're going to use. There are a lot of decisions that go into it. And that makes this kind of a hobby, you know, just like as if you're doing any other hobby that involves collecting things or, you know, making decisions about things. It creates a level of individual involvement and individual engagement in the process, which you don't see with NRT. And so that was another thing that was perceived as being part of the effectiveness of these products. And the last thing we found was that there's a difference between smoking addiction and nicotine addiction. And there are a large number of smokers who simply don't want to give up the nicotine. That's to them, it's just a really important part of the experience. And it's not that they really want the cigarettes anymore, but they do want the nicotine. And so these products give them an opportunity to get the nicotine and to essentially become smoke-free without becoming nicotine-free. And so that was another attractive feature. So I think that the way that this research really changes the field of tobacco control is that it really takes away this perception that smoking addiction is simply an addiction to nicotine, and that if you just replace the nicotine, that you have conquered the addiction. And I think it forces us to recognize that smoking addiction is not just a pharmacologic addiction, it's also a behavioral, physical, and social addiction. There are lots of reinforcing aspects of the behavior, and that you need to replace all of them. You need to treat all of them. And the reason why electronic cigarettes are taking off, I believe, is because they address not only the pharmacologic, but also these other aspects of the addiction. Absolutely. I think there is a general assumption that is driving the national predominance of focus on NRT as the centerpiece of the nation's smoking cessation strategy. And that assumption is that nicotine is really the essence of smoking addiction, that this is a pharmacologic addiction, and if you just replace the nicotine, that you can cure the addiction. I think that's an assumption that has been within the tobacco control community, and I think it's just not the case. If you talk to smokers, my experience talking to smokers, interviewing smokers, treating smokers in the past has been that there's a lot more to this addiction than just the nicotine. There's physical aspects of holding cigarette, the mouth sensations, the puffing, the exhaling, the inhaling. There's even the throat hit. A lot of the vapors we talked about the importance of the throat hit. So there's a lot of the physical aspects of this, behavioral aspects of the addiction. And they're just as important as the nicotine addiction. And so nicotine replacement therapy is simply not going to be able to address those aspects of the addiction. I shared with the audience today data showing that replacing nicotine actually is not sufficient to cure the nicotine withdrawal symptoms. But interestingly, the converse is also the case, that giving people cigarettes without nicotine, so sham cigarettes essentially, is able to prevent many of the withdrawal symptoms. Even though the person's not getting any nicotine, you're actually curing or preventing a lot of their withdrawal symptoms. And how can you possibly explain that? And I think the way you can explain that is by understanding that smoking addiction is a complex phenomenon involving pharmacology, but also physical, behavioral, and social stimuli. And if you address those physical and behavioral and social stimuli, you actually can prevent cigarette craving, even in the absence of nicotine. Now, I'm not suggesting that should be done, but it does suggest that the combination of provision of nicotine combined with replacement of the smoking experience is really, I think, the ultimate treatment. And I think that's why electronic cigarettes have been so successful, and this is why I view products like electronic cigarettes as the wave of the future. Yeah, I think that there are individual differences between smokers, and there's a continuum where for some smokers the nicotine is the hallmark of the addiction, and at the other end of the spectrum, it's people who are affected more by the behavior, and the nicotine is a little bit less important. And so I think not everybody is going to be able to quit in the same way, and people need to have a range of options available to them. And I've never argued that NRT should not be available. Obviously, it's out there, it's very popular, and it should be. I think the important point is that smokers have as many options that they can, and that they should be able to choose and tailor their treatment to what works best for them. But certainly for smokers who fail using NRT or other traditional methods of smoking cessation, the availability of electronic cigarettes could be a lifesaver, and it is a lifesaver for many people. Because they've tried all these other methods and have not succeeded. And so having a product that can actually replace cigarette smoking, the behavior for them, is I think, a godsend for many people. And so there are literally thousands of people who have failed using traditional means, who have finally found something that gives them some hope. So the idea that the government may take these off the market or restrict them or severely restrict the kinds of claims that companies can make in terms of the truthful aspects of what their products offer, I think is unfortunate and is a risk that I hope that the FDA will not, I hope it's something the FDA will not fall into, this trap of putting the ideology of preventing nicotine addiction above the best interests of the public. Well, I think it's pretty clear to me at this point that some sort of tobacco-free cigarette alternative device is going to be the wave of the future. And whether it's the current electronic cigarette or some innovative improvement upon this product, I think that clearly the wave of the future is some variant of this product, if not the type of products that exist today, or maybe a range of products that people can choose from depending on their tastes. And I think that we need to do everything that we can to allow innovation in this category. Anything that the FDA does which stifles innovation or stifles new products, it stifles the claims that these products can make, truthful claims about the improvement that they can offer to smokers in terms of the effectiveness of treating smoking, and also the fact that they're a lot safer than cigarettes, I think would be unfortunate. So it's clear to me from this conference, talking to many electronic cigarette manufacturers and many people in other aspects of the industry, that this is really a thriving industry that shows incredible promise, that is really very serious about its quality control and its standards, and is searching constantly for the best of safety and efficacy. So I think it's an industry that's here to stay. I think that this is the wave of the future. I think it's very significant that now all three major tobacco companies are in the electronic cigarette business. I think that that's a sign that they realize that this is for real. This is going to be here. That it's going to take significant market share away from cigarettes, and therefore better that they should enjoy some of the profits from that to offset the decreases in cigarette sales. And it's just my hope that the rest of the public health community can kind of see the writing on the wall and realize that they've got to get on board. It's kind of ironic to me that the anti-smoking groups, the public health groups, are the last to come on board to this product.
Siegel, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Sure, my pleasure.